Hello, my name's Tony Wolfe. I'm a consultant in intensive care and one of the Chief Medical Information Officers at the Royal Free London. I'm going to divide my talk into three parts. Firstly, presenting you with a series of questions about your current state, then suggesting a route to becoming more data-driven, and finally asking maybe a somewhat controversial question as to whether you really want to get there. So, firstly, is the data good enough to rely on? Do you have a data dictionary? And that's somewhere, firstly, that tells you where to find data, but also, and more importantly, the definitions of that data. So, for instance, take date and time of admission to hospital. Does that mean the date and time the patient presented in ED, or the date and time the decision was made to admit the patient, or finally the date and time the patient arrived on the ward? This is crucial. Let's say you are trying to reduce hospital length of stay. It's vital that you know what your definition of date and time of admission to hospital, and that date and time remains the same throughout your study. If it suddenly moves from the date and time of presentation at ED to the date and time of arrival on the ward, you will obviously and very spuriously find that your length of stay has shortened. Is necessary data always available? Can staff access the data they need, both in terms of permission and ability? Is data discussed at meetings? And when I say discussed, I don't mean presented, I mean questioned, both in terms of quality and its meaning. And finally, does data affect decisions made? I want to move on to business cases. I want you to imagine that in your organisation you've done a trial of a new machine or process or some software, and you're now putting together a business case. Does the business case consist of these sort of phrases? It made my job easier. I made fewer mistakes. I did it faster. It was safer. Does it look like this? With it, my job was easier. I spent 1 hour a day more with my patients. I made 40% fewer data entry errors. I saved 4 hours a month. It's safer. There are 20% fewer drug errors. I want you to imagine a new consultant arrives at your hospital. He's a diabetic consultant, and he turns to his manager and he says, it would be really helpful if every morning I could receive an email listing the patients who had been admitted to the hospital in the past 24 hours who had previously been coded as diabetic. Would the manager know who to refer him to? And when he arrived in front of that manager, what would the response be? Would it be, I'm sure we can do that. Let's make sure we get you all the data you need. Not sure. I'll need to get back to you. I'm sorry. We don't have the people, the time or the skills to do that sort of thing. A very similar situation could arise with a new manager who very enthusiastically turns to one of their colleagues and says, it would be really helpful if I could get an email every morning telling me which patients have been admitted in the past 24 hours who had had a length of stay of greater than 2 weeks. So, let's consider how you do QI. Suppose you wanted to improve the percentage of admissions having documentation completed within 12 hours. What would your approach be? Would you replicate the paper world, taking a sample of the notes of 50 patients recently admitted and examine them individually, electronically maybe, but still going into the record of each individual patient, identifying the time of the admission and then the time that the admission note was documented, and entering that data into Excel, and then triumphantly coming up with a number of 76% for the month of August? Or would you be someone who would embrace the new world, where you would locate the 2 data items in the electronic health record database for all admissions, create the relevant SQL and execute it, and make sure that that query was routinely used to produce a regular report? So, how do you become data-driven? Well, you need to have good data, you need your staff to have the skills to use that data, you need the right technology to use that data, and you need the desire to really become more data-driven. Data is fundamental. If you haven't got data, everything else will fall apart. You need a well-supported data warehouse, you need the data dictionary, you need to actively manage data collection. Every department has some bit of data they want to collect, and they create a form, usually a paper form, and then they transcribe it onto Excel. You really want to control that. You want to say, if you want to collect data, come and see us. We'll tell you what data is already being collected, and we will help you collect the extra bits of data that you need for your particular purpose. And then finally, you need quality reports. Quality reports require 2 things. They need good software, and there's lots of it out there: Tableau, Qlik, Power BI, and many more. And then you need the staff to be trained at all levels. You need sophisticated staff to produce reports, but you need many more staff to be able to interact with reports. I think at a departmental level, it's like with Excel. With Excel, there's always 1 or 2 people in the department who are regarded as a whiz, and people go and talk to them. And I would like the same to happen for data analytics. In order to get good quality data, you need to seamlessly integrate data from multiple sources. You need, in the end, a single source of truth. But in order to get there, I believe you need to compare multiple sources of the same item to check that they correspond before you narrow yourself down to that single source of truth. You need to ensure that the staff care about and use the data, and if you show people their data, they will quickly enough tell you when it's wrong. And behind all this, you need a team that cares for and understands the data. So, now for the controversial question. So, do you really want to be a data-driven organisation? In the evidence-free world, those in authority could push ahead with their vision. If data is democratised, those opposing a vision may produce uncomfortable evidence against your plans. A truly data-driven organisation needs to understand that arguments based on evidence may be more challenging to produce, but often lead to better decisions. However, the data needs to be robust. Using data that is obviously flawed makes you and your ideas flaky. A data-driven organisation needs to be comfortable changing direction based on evidence. When data changes, it's appropriate to change your direction of travel. It is not a sign of weakness or indecision. Thank you.